South Africa has filed a referral with the International Criminal Court to investigate Israel's onslaught on Gaza. This follows discussions with Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. The Qatari government is negotiating the release of hostages taken by Hamas on October the 7th. The President, Cyril Ramaphosa, is calling for a ceasefire and for a resolution of the crisis through a two-state solution. What does this move made by South Africa actually mean? And Wits Law School visiting professor Dr. Swart joins us now to share her perspective. Dr. Swart, good evening to you and welcome. What is a referral? What does it mean in practical terms?
Well, in order for the ICC, hello, Iman. In order for the ICC to be able to take up a case, a case needs to be referred to the ICC. And there are different ways in which a case can get to the ICC. One way is through states referring a case. It can be an individual state or a group of states. In this case, it's a group of states that has now referred the situation to the ICC. Article 14 of the ICC statute provides for this. And actually, it's an interesting week because many cases in terms of the Gaza conflict is reaching the ICC this week. For example, there's a case that is being led by a French lawyer that involves a group of 400 individuals that's also reaching the ICC. Yeah.
So on a practical level then, so this referral then, which is collective and agreed on exactly what is being pursued or what is being asked for from the ICC. What can South Africa and those who've lodged this referral expect from the ICC then in the short and the long term?
All right. So in the short run, unfortunately, not much will happen. The ICC is very slow with these cases, and I expect that in the shorter run, there will just be a waiting period to wait for the ICC prosecutor to do more investigations, to get access to Gaza, to get evidence. I think that this move makes a lot more sense in the longer run because it's a move that makes sense in terms of a sort of a strategic litigation and symbolism because nothing will happen, in a matter of days or weeks. But in the longer term, activists feel that, we must do all we can and we must show our support for the victims of the most horrendous international crimes that are now being committed by the minute. And, this is something that symbolically means a lot.
And while symbolism is important, though, Emir, and everyone can appreciate that, you've seen protests the world over. That's a form of symbolism. You've seen countries place their feelings or their responses or calls for different resolutions on record at the highest, in the highest echelons of power, including the UNSC. But what the situation would require, given the high civilian death toll and the suffering in the region that we're reporting, is something that stops this now.
Yes. So with regard to that, I don't think the ICC is the route to go. I think that diplomacy is much more important. I think the kinds of talks that has been happening in Qatar is very valuable because Qatar has real influence in the region and, can make things move much more quickly than an ICC referral. One would hope that, that countries such as Qatar would absolutely insist on an immediate ceasefire. And the ceasefire should not be dependent on the release of all hostages, even though one hopes the hostages should get released. One cannot make the ceasefire dependent on that because too many people are dying.
We see historically, Emir, that it takes time, sometimes many years, to even conclude investigations, let alone to have charges brought before the ICC and then for justice to even materialize. You've spoken about the diplomatic alternatives that countries can embark upon to obtain things like a ceasefire. But what are some of the legal alternatives to the ICC? Is that the only recourse legally?
Okay. Well, a lawyer friend refers to the ICC sometimes as the only show in town. But what he means by that is that it is this sort of international instrument and international court that, has been designed for this specific kind of situation. The alternative is a national court taking up this matter, because under universal jurisdiction, national courts can prosecute international crimes. You don't have to wait for the ICC. This has happened in the case of Rwandan war criminals and other war criminals that, national states, primarily countries such as Germany, have undertaken universal jurisdiction cases. But this is also not entirely strange to South Africa, because you might remember the Zimbabwe torture case. It was called the Zimbabwe torture docket case, and this was taken up by the South African Constitutional Court. And the case, was a very successful case involving arresting a number of officials who were committing torture in Zimbabwe. And this, could be a potential route. But again, you would need evidence gathering, you would need an investigation, the same story. So it would again not be something that would save lives in the short term.
It's interesting that you talk about evidence gathering. The French lawyer that you're talking about, Gilles Devers, was saying
Yes.
from his perspective, and the other 400 lawyers you mentioned who are banding together, that it was clear for them that the situation in Palestine has all the hallmarks or all the criteria of a case against genocide. And I'm wondering whether it is an idea or an alternative to actually put all of the people that have made these referrals or are pursuing a legal action on this to band together and, as you say, use a country like South Africa to launch a national prosecution of sorts?
Right. It would. I actually think multiple cases is a good idea. I think that it puts more pressure on the ICC. Something that Devers, the French lawyer, said that was very insightful is he said that Israel has already sort of helped the case against them by making such clear statements regarding genocide, saying, people should move, should leave their houses. In other words, forced removals in a sense, or collective punishment against the civilian population. Israel has, starkly made statements that, already makes these cases clear, which I think will just make it more and more unacceptable for the ICC to drag its feet, which I fully expect will happen in this case because of the geopolitical implications of holding Israel accountable.
Dr. Swart, thank you very much for your time this evening. We appreciate it. She is a Wits Law School visiting professor. We'll take a short break and we'll be back straight after.